The corn towered. Stalks, thick as a man's arm, swallowed the last rays of sun. Dusk settled, a cold hand on Thomas's neck. He shivered. Bad idea, coming in here. He dared himself, of course. Every town had its legend, and this cornfield sprawling behind Blackwood Manor was theirs. Haunted, they said, full of whispers. Thomas pushed deeper, boots crunching on dry earth. Shadows stretched, twisting familiar shapes into monstrous things. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of rotting vegetation. Fear, sharp and cold, pricked his skin. He shouldn't have come. The wind picked up, rustling dry leaves. Whispers, soft and indistinct, seemed to ride the breeze. Thomas stopped, holding his breath, straining to hear. Just the wind, he told himself. But the hair on his arms stood on end. The whispers seemed closer now, circling him. He could have sworn he heard his name, uttered in a hushed, mournful tone. Panic welled in his chest, a suffocating pressure. He had to get out. Turning, he retraced his steps, but the path seemed different now, the rows of corn unfamiliar. Lost. He was lost. Every rustle of leaves, every sigh of the wind, sent shivers down his spine. Something watched him. He could feel its presence, cold and malevolent, lurking just beyond sight. His heart pounded against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the growing darkness. He stumbled forward, pushing through the unforgiving stalks, desperate to escape the suffocating presence that closed in around him. The whispers intensified, swirling around him like a vortex of despair. They spoke of sorrow, of anger, of a hunger that chilled him to the bone. He was trapped, prey in a hunt as old as time. He cried out, a desperate plea for help swallowed by the rustling leaves. The only answer was the mocking laughter of the wind. Then he saw it. At the end of the row, a scarecrow stood sentinel. But this was no ordinary scarecrow. Its clothes, ragged and stained, hung on its frame like the skin of a decaying corpse. And its head, it wasn't a sack stuffed with straw. It was a skull, bleached white by the sun, its empty socket staring directly at him. A grin stretched across its bony features, a grotesque parody of amusement. Thomas stumbled back, his blood turning to ice. The whispers seemed to emanate from the skull, their tone mocking, triumphant. He was trapped, claimed by whatever evil haunted this field. He whirled around, searching for another way out, but every direction looked the same. An endless maze of rustling stalks and lurking shadows. He was hopelessly, terrifyingly lost. Panic threatened to consume him. His breaths came in ragged gasps, each one a desperate attempt to fill his lungs with air. The darkness around him seemed to close in, suffocating, as if the night itself was alive and intent on swallowing him whole. Each turn he took led to another dead end, another wall of rustling stalks. The cornfield was a labyrinth, a twisted maze that seemed to shift and change with every step he took. He could feel the weight of the night pressing down on him, the oppressive silence broken only by the sound of his own footsteps and the rustling of the corn. The scarecrow's grin followed him, a haunting specter that mocked his every move. Its eyes seemed to glow with a malevolent light, watching him, judging him. He could feel its presence, a dark shadow that loomed over him, a constant reminder of his fear and desperation. The whispers intensified, whispering his name, taunting him with his fear. They seemed to come from all around him, disembodied voices that echoed through the night. He could hear them clearly now, each word a dagger that pierced his mind, filling him with dread. They were closer now, the voices distinct, filled with a chilling malice that sent shivers crawling down his spine. He could almost feel their breath on his neck, cold and clammy, as if the very air around him had turned against him. He ran, his breath catching in his throat, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to stop, to rest, but he couldn't. The fear drove him on, a relentless force that pushed him to keep moving, to keep running. The stalks whipped at his face, tore at his clothes, but he didn't stop. He could feel the sting of the cuts, the warmth of the blood trickling down his skin, but it was nothing compared to the terror that gripped his heart. He had to keep going, had to find a way out. He couldn't stop, not while those whispers followed him, not while that grinning skull haunted his every step. The fear was a living thing, a beast that chased him through the night, its claws digging into his mind, its breath hot on his heels. He had to escape this nightmare, had to find his way back to the world of light and reason. The thought of safety, of warmth and light, was the only thing that kept him going. He could see a faint glimmer in the distance, a beacon of hope in the darkness, but the cornfield held him tight, its grip relentless, unforgiving. It was as if the very earth conspired against him. the stalks closing in, the paths twisting and turning to keep him trapped. He could feel the weight of the night pressing down on him, the darkness a living thing that sought to consume him. Section 6. The Girl in White. A sob escaped his lips as he stumbled through the darkness, his clothes torn, his body weary. He was lost, hopelessly lost, and the shadows were closing in. Then through the rustling stalks, he saw her. A young girl dressed in a white gown, her long dark hair cascading down her back. She stood facing away from him, her head tilted as if listening to something. Hope surged through him. Someone else. He wasn't alone. "Help me," he croaked, his voice hoarse. "Please, I'm lost." The girl turned, her face pale in the moonlight. Her eyes wide and dark held a depth of sadness that chilled him to the bone. She opened her mouth but no sound emerged. Section 7. Buried Secrets. He reached out, desperation clawing at his throat. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You have to help me." The girl took a step back, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of fear and warning. She pointed to the ground at her feet. He followed her gaze and saw it. A small, weathered headstone, almost completely hidden by the encroaching weeds. He knelt down, brushing away the dirt, and read the inscription, etched in worn lettering. "Here lies Bethany, beloved daughter, lost but never forgotten." The whispers seemed to intensify, swirling around him, their tone filled with a mournful rage. He looked back up at the girl, a cold dread settling in his stomach. This was Bethany, and this cornfield, it was her grave. Section 8. Escape from the Maze. The night was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the rustling of the corn stalks swaying in the wind. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the very atmosphere was conspiring to keep him trapped. Understanding dawned, cold and terrifying. He realized that this was no ordinary cornfield. It was a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred, a realm where lost souls wandered aimlessly. He wasn't meant to escape. The cornfield seemed to stretch endlessly, a labyrinth designed to ensnare those who dared to enter. Every turn he took led him deeper into its clutches. This wasn't just a cornfield, it was a prison, a place of sorrow and restless spirits. The whispers of the damned echoed through the rows, their mournful cries a constant reminder of the fate that awaited him if he failed to escape. Bethany, trapped here for eternity, couldn't leave, and neither could he. Her ghostly figure appeared before him, her eyes filled with a sorrow that pierced his soul. She had been here for so long, her spirit bound to this cursed place. Despair threatened to consume him, but a flicker of defiance ignited in his chest. He couldn't let this place break him. He had to fight, not just for himself but for Bethany too. She deserved to be free, and so did he. He wouldn't let the cornfield claim him, wouldn't let fear paralyze him. He steeled himself, drawing strength from the determination that now burned within him. He had to find a way out, no matter the cost. He had to find a way out, for both their sakes. The maze of corn seemed impenetrable, but he knew there had to be an exit. He just had to keep moving, keep searching. He stood, his gaze sweeping the seemingly endless rows of corn. The moonlight cast eerie shadows, making it difficult to discern any clear path. But he couldn't afford to lose hope. He had to think, had to find a landmark, a clue, anything to guide him. His mind raced, trying to recall any detail that might help him navigate this nightmare. And then he saw it, a faint glow in the distance. A beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. It was faint, but unmistakable. It called to him, promising a way out. With renewed determination he ran, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The corn stalks whipped against his face, but he didn't care. He had to reach that light. The whispers followed him, their tone angry now, threatening, but he didn't stop. He could feel their presence closing in, but he pushed himself harder, refusing to let them catch him. He wouldn't let them break him. He wouldn't let the fear take hold. He had come too far to give up now. He wouldn't let them win. He would escape this cursed place for himself and for Bethany. The light grew closer, and with it the promise of freedom. Section 9. A Haunting Memory. The glow grew brighter, resolving itself into the headlights of a car parked on the edge of the field. The night was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, casting long, ghostly shadows across the cornfield. Salvation. He burst through the final row of stalks, collapsing onto the soft earth, his chest heaving. His breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale a painful reminder of the terror he had just escaped. The ground beneath him felt cool and welcoming, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the cornfield. He didn't look back, he didn't need to. The horrors he had witnessed were seared into his mind, an indelible mark that no amount of distance could erase. His legs moved on autopilot, driven by a primal instinct to flee, to put as much space as possible between himself and the nightmare he had just endured. The whispers followed him, faint now, fading into the night, a chilling reminder of the terror he had endured. They seemed to cling to him, like a dark cloud that refused to dissipate. Each whisper was a ghostly echo of the voices he had heard in the cornfield, voices that spoke of things best left forgotten. He never returned to the cornfield, never spoke of what he had seen. The memories were too painful, too raw. The cornfield became a forbidden place, a dark spot on the map of his life that he avoided at all costs. Even the thought of it sent shivers down his spine. But the memory lingered, a haunting presence in the quiet corners of his mind. The rustling leaves, the whispers on the wind, they were all reminders of that fateful night. He could never escape them, no matter how hard he tried. They were a part of him now, woven into the very fabric of his being. The whispers on the wind, they haunted his dreams, turning peaceful nights into a battleground of fear and anxiety. Each gust of wind carried with it the voices of the past, a chilling reminder of the horrors he had faced. The girl in white with her eyes full of sorrow. She was the most haunting memory of all. Her eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness, filled with a sadness that spoke of untold stories and unfulfilled destinies. She was a ghostly figure, a reminder of the lives lost in the cornfield. They were etched into his soul, a chilling reminder of the night he was lost in the nightmare of the haunted cornfield. The memories were like scars, visible only to him but felt deeply with every passing day. They were a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface. He never forgot Bethany, the girl lost, but never forgotten. Her name was a whisper on his lips, a silent prayer for a soul that had been taken too soon. She was a symbol of innocence lost, a reminder of the price of curiosity and the dangers that lurked in the shadows. He carried her memory with him, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the ordinary. It was a darkness that could consume anyone, a darkness that he had narrowly escaped but would never forget. It was a haunting echo of the night he came face to face with the true meaning of fear. A haunting echo of the night he came face to face with the true meaning of fear. It was a night that changed him forever, a night that left him with a deep understanding of the fragility of life and the ever-present darkness that could emerge when least expected. The cornfield was no longer just a place. It was a symbol of his deepest fears and the haunting memories that would follow him for the rest of his life.